We're previewing 49ers training camp. To the offensive side of the ball we go. Skill positions, running backs, and tight ends. Niners have a huge advantage at both of these positions because of some star power, but also some sneaky good camp competitions as well. On today's Locked On 49ers.
You are Locked On 49ers, your daily San Francisco 49ers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On 49ers. Brian Peacock and Eric Crocker at BD Peacock at Coach Crocky. Thanks everybody for making us your first listen on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Appreciate all of our everydayers. Thanks for hanging with us as we get ready for training camp. Rookies reporting on Tuesday. Vets coming in next Tuesday. We're getting close to some real actual football, some pads cracking at 49ers training camp. So we're previewing all the positions, reminding everybody who's even on the roster with some off-season moves. Got some good rookies to talk about, I think, competing for spots on the depth chart on today's program. So thanks for hanging with us. If you're new to the program, welcome. Make sure you're subscribed up on YouTube or anywhere you are listening to this podcast. In today's episode of Locked On 49ers brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first ticket purchase. One thing I want to talk about here first, Croc, when it comes to running backs and tight ends, the two positions we're going to preview on today's show, is that clearly we know the starting running back and tight end are obviously on the 49ers. It's not up for debate. It's not up for any remote challenge from anybody with George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey at those two positions respectively. But one thing the 49ers have with Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle is two of the best, if not the best in the NFL when they're healthy at those spots. And it's just such a massive advantage that Kyle Shanahan has as a play caller that the 49ers have on offense when you have two players that aren't just good at, running the ball, catching the ball, but with Christian McCaffrey, two-way, running it, catching it, how hard he plays, which has been the one thing that I didn't respect enough about Christian McCaffrey before he became a 49er. I love how hard Christian McCaffrey plays, how much each yard matters to him, how he kept the 49ers in an NFC championship game when they had lost their quarterback. And it was like, man, could they really pull this off with Josh Johnson before they lost even their next quarterback, right? Because it was close, big score late. And I was like, man, this dude. And then I don't think you even need to say anything about George Kittle. And again, it's not just catching the football. It's blocking too. He's the best in the NFL at both of those things. Just a complete travesty that he wasn't named the best tight end in the NFL recently with some voting from executives, ESPN poll, and a rookie last year in Brock Bowers was named number one. Kittle was number two. And it's like, do we not even factor in blocking anymore with tight ends? It's half of the job. It's insane that we just don't even look at it. And even guys, like I would expect it from maybe some fans in fantasy football, but executives and coaches around the league think that Brock Bowers is a better football player than George Kittle. It's asinine. It's downright disrespectful, Croc. But the thing that shouldn't go lost here is how good the 49ers are at those two positions when healthy and how much of a cheat code it is, how much of an advantage the 49ers have being that much better and just with multi-talented guys that can help you in so many ways on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, we've seen George Kittle be good regardless of what quarterback is back there. Same with Christian McCaffrey as well. I mean, throughout the majority of his time in Carolina, not the greatest quarterback play under center over there, and he was still able to contribute at a very high level. And George Kittle, I mean, he was breaking records with Nick Mullins and C.J. Beathard at quarterback, having 1,300 yards in a season at the time, which was the most ever that we had ever seen at the tight end position. And to see at this time in the age and kind of where he's at in his career, him still be able to not just contribute at a high level, but be one of the best tight ends. And like you said, should have been the best tight end. And there was a big discussion about it with, who's the first team All-Pro tight end, second team All-Pro. Obviously, they gave it to Bowers. I don't think that's taken into account a couple of things. One, efficiency. George Kittle and his production is at a really high level with not the same amount of volume as far as targets as a guy like Brock Bowers. So you see that part. And then you factor in his ability to block. And like tight end, it's not like they just have one job. All right. They have multiple jobs and they're doing multiple things. And it's almost like you're getting rewarded for doing one thing at a high level as opposed to, man, this guy is not only doing one thing at a very high level to where we're recognizing him as second team All-Pro, but it should be the other part of their job that catapults him to actually first team All-Pro, which is his blocking. And I've listened to certain things and heard podcasts and heard him talk about how, the 49ers, obviously there's been some struggles with pass protection, but there's been a guy that they've used to kind of help slow down pass protection as well. So we think about him in the run blocking game and how aggressive he is and how much pride he takes in run blocking. But he's been a key part of the pass blocking as well when need be. So he's a Swiss Army knife. He does it all. And even at this age, he's doing it at an extremely high level.
Absolutely. Amen to that. And so fun to watch George Kittle and Christian McCaffrey as well. George Kittle last year, 1,100 receiving yards on only 78 catches, 14.2 yards per reception. I mean, that's even a lot of yards per reception for a wide receiver, let alone a tight end, who usually those guys at those positions are catching the ball closer to the line of scrimmage and not asked to, make a lot of plays down the field, make a lot of plays after the catch like George Kittle is. So phenomenal on 94 targets, 78 catches, 1,100 receiving yards. Obviously, if let's focus a little bit more on running back real quick, and we'll go back to what's going on behind George Kittle on the defensive or on the tight end position in some backup roles on the depth chart. But Christian McCaffrey obviously hurt most of the year last year. He only ended up with 146 receiving yards. He had, let's see where those rushing yards are here. He ended up with 202 rushing yards on 50 attempts over the course of, parts of 4 games. So obviously not the year that Christian McCaffrey wanted. And it was a tough season. You go back to the year before and what a healthy Christian McCaffrey looks like. And that means he's the best running back in the NFL. He had nearly 1,500 rushing yards the year before and another 564 receiving yards on 67 receptions out of the backfield. So, I mean, a 2,000-yard player from scrimmage in 2023 was Christian McCaffrey. That's why he was an All-Pro. That's why he was Offensive Player of the Year, and he was actually even third in MVP voting in 2023. Yeah, so just a matchup nightmare is Christian McCaffrey coming out of the backfield. I think the biggest conversation right now, Croc, about Christian McCaffrey as it pertains to the 49ers, and I was on KMBR last week talking with Larry Kruger, and he got on the soapbox about it, and we talked a little bit about it. It's like, you got to find a way to, while he's a cheat code, and both these guys are in Christian McCaffrey and George Kittle, and you got to give him the ball as much as possible. You've got to find a way to keep the touches down for Christian McCaffrey. And when you touch the ball 350 times in a season, you get hurt the next season. It's just what happens in the NFL. And Christian McCaffrey at times looks like he's a cyborg, but he's not. He is a human being. He is flesh and blood, and you got to save him from himself. And Kyle Shanahan needs to devise a plan where he can save himself from his play calling self as well. And even times, and it was a great point that Larry brought up, Croc, about saving Christian McCaffrey, is just some of the extra carries when you're up 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And we talked about some of those times, like, can you not hand the ball to Jordan Mason, who, by the way, averages 5 yards a carry himself when you're up 2 scores? Like, can you not find another way? And I'm sure McCaffrey wants to be out there and close those games out, and I get it, and he's a competitor. But you got to save him from himself. You got to lessen the load on Christian McCaffrey to not only keep him healthy throughout the postseason, but elongate his own career, because he's such a good receiver. He should be able to have a long career.
And we talk about his receiving ability. We talk about needing him in the postseason. And I think one of the biggest areas where the 49ers really missed him last season, with him not being on the field, was in the red zone and how much he contributes there. So, yeah, if there's an opportunity to kind of spell him here and there in certain aspects of the game, whether it's to end the game or even on a drive, bringing somebody else to spell him. And let's say out of 4 drives in the first half, one of them, he's not in there for the entire drive. But when you get to the red zone, that's where he's like the biggest beneficiary. The 49ers with JP Mason running the ball last season, in the absence of Christian McCaffrey, he was one of the top rushers in the league for a quarter of the season. Right now, that's not a super large sample size, but that just showed, man, the production is there. But against the Jets, why did the 49ers kick 6 field goals? Well, they weren't scoring touchdowns. And when you think about why they're not, man, a big part of it is having a guy like Christian McCaffrey there. So how do you not just prolong him for the majority of the season, but how do you make it to where you're not going to miss him in one of the most important aspects of the game, and that's in the red zone, in the green zone, where you need to put up touchdowns? And that was something that ended up kind of biting the 49ers in the rear end for a lot of the season.
And by the way, you want to go back to 2023, George Kittle was also a 1,000-yard receiver that season as well. So just consistent, awesome football player. Christian McCaffrey was on the field. There's no question. Keep him on the field, I think, is the biggest key when it comes to Christian McCaffrey in the running back position for the 49ers this year. One of my favorite stats about the running backs, though, when it comes to Christian McCaffrey and others who are capable NFL football players that are behind him on the depth chart, and I think what is shaping up potentially to be a flat out awesome, a lot of good, we talked about it, Croc, a lot of good competition on the defense side of the ball, a flat out awesome camp competition potentially behind Christian McCaffrey at running back. Next. Today's episode of Locked On 49ers is brought to you by Gametime and the Gametime app. We've all been there, logging on early, waiting forever for concert tickets to go on sale, only to lose your spot for a show you've been dying to see. Live music should be about making memories, not dealing with the stress of ticket shopping. That's where Gametime comes in. Gametime makes getting concert tickets faster and easier than ever. Prices actually drop as it gets closer to showtime. Opening act about to go on, you can still get up to maybe 60% off of those killer last-minute seats for your favorite concert. You want to go catch a Giants ball game. Giants-Dodgers was a big ticket this weekend. There was tickets on Gametime. And by the way, a lot of Dodgers fans in town this weekend. I know there's a lot of LA transplants. They don't quite travel like the 49ers do, but there was some blue. A little too much blue in the stands, I think, in San Francisco this weekend. A lot of them might have hit Gametime for those seats. So you should do it next time. Keep the orange and black in the seats and take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets and show tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So I find it interesting, Croc, that in fact, not only was Jordan Mason good in his role as a 49ers backup, he was like the number 3 guy, he was an undrafted guy, worked his way up and was the backup to Christian McCaffrey last year before he and himself got hurt. His career yards per carry is higher than Christian McCaffrey's, both as a 49er and just career yards per carry. And that's not to say that he's a better football player or anything like that. We know how good Christian McCaffrey is. It just goes to say that there's other players on the 49ers roster that are capable, that are professional athletes. They have NFL uniforms on. Utilize them, right?
We've seen this a lot with Kyle Shanahan, though.
Yeah.
He is going to fully utilize the guys he trusts. Always go back to the COVID game where you're missing Kendrick Bourne and Debo and Ayuk and all these guys. And Richie James is like, well, okay, I'll step in since you guys have nobody else. And he had 9 catches for 170 yards and a touchdown. That's not to say that Richie James is going to be that every single game, but it did go to show that maybe you should use him a little bit more than you have, or that you are capable of at least somewhat utilizing him, right? And it was a guy that just didn't quite see the field outside of a little bit of spot duty here and there during his tenure with the 49ers. Kyle Shanahan, it's always been about trust. Doesn't matter who it is that he has that's actually starting. Elijah Mitchell, he went into a big game, primetime television game against the Rams. I felt like he was kind of duct taped together where, his knee was banged up, his ribs were all messed up, his finger. I know I got a text message from somebody in the building that was like, I don't think Elijah Mitchell's going to be able to go. Like, this guy, he's having some really troubles with certain aspects of his knee and stuff like that. Not only did the 49ers play him, but he had like 27 carries. And not only did he have 27 carries, like, bro, the 49ers are up like 3 scores. Why is he still carrying the ball? So Kyle Shanahan, it's all about whoever is available that he trusts the most. And I think that was the bigger issue. JP Mason showed time and time again, I can run the rock. And there were times, even after he was someone who, again, led the league in rushing for the first quarter of the season, once CMC was back, how do you go games where he's either not touching the ball or gets 1 carry?
Yeah.
Shouldn't be that way.
It shouldn't. And utilize the players on your roster. And here's the thing is you can do both. And that's kind of been my plan. And look, it's not just JP Mason either. It was, Elijah Mitchell before him. It was Alfred Morris with the Washington football team. And it was Steve Slayton. And it was like Christian, the Kyle Shanahan offense creates like if you have a capable running back that understands the system, that can hit that hole and cut back, like you're gonna have a good running game. And that's why you have Kyle Shanahan as your coach. The thing that Christian McCaffrey is great at is not only being an awesome runner, but an awesome receiver. So my plan for McCaffrey to save his body is to get him even more impactful touches in the receiving game and maybe fewer just beating your head against the wall carries that other backs are capable of doing. And so I think that Christian McCaffrey should be the new wide back, because Ricky Pearsall is a very different football player. He might be lined up in that Z wide receiver position where Deebo Samuel used to be, but they're very different, right? So you want to get that yards after catch. You want to be a matchup nightmare for teams. Well, instead of running out there with a wide receiver who becomes a running back, and now all of a sudden they have to, they're conflicted whether they have to treat your offense like 11 personnel or 21 personnel. Well, how about you do the opposite, where you run out there with two running backs and you say, oh, never mind. Guess what? Christian McCaffrey's in the slot now. And now you've got a linebacker because you think it's 21 personnel, and you still have a running back there who can run the football. So like a dual halfback situation. Could something like that work? Or just utilizing McCaffrey's number? Is McCaffrey not one of the 49ers top receivers, like period right now? Would you rather have McCaffrey running out there or Demarcus Robinson, or McCaffrey running out there, or Luke, the 49ers backup tight end? I got to look back at Luke Farrell. I was blanking on his name, right? Luke Farrell. He's going to be more of a blocker than a receiver. Ross Dwelly, I think, is back in the house, right? Braden was like, who would you rather have catching the football? Christian McCaffrey, the new wide back, I think. And we know analytics tells us that receptions are more valuable than carries.
There is another option, but Kyle Shanahan definitely won't do it. But, I went and spent a lot of time learning the air raid offense, right? I got air raid certified.
Okay.
I watched every YouTube video on how mummy that you can find, right? I dove into every aspect of the air raid offense, right? Learned it so I can call it when I'm calling offensive plays. And one thing that I learned is a lot of people believe that they don't care about the running game. That's not quite true. If it's there, they'll run the ball. You get numbers, they'll run it. But their philosophy is what you feel like it should be, right? It's you got 5 weapons out there, and they believe that a balanced attack is not a 50-50 split in run and passes, right? You look and it's like, oh man, 25 throws, 25 carries, that's a balanced offense, right? No, they believe if you can get the ball into all 5 eligible pass catchers' hands equally, or they can all equally be a threat on any given play, that is a balanced offense, including the running back. So one thing I noticed a lot that they do is they'll have their concepts and they'll run wide cross. And with the 49ers, you have a true wide with George Kittle, and he's able to run that deep cross. You get the backside dig or sit route. But if it's not there, they'll check it down to the running back really quick, and you let him go pick up 7 yards. And now you're getting the ball to Christian McCaffrey out on the edge in space to where he can get out of bounds, doesn't have to take a lot of hits just running through the A and big gap all game. That's not to say that they neglect the run game. They will run it, and we've seen variations of it at the NFL level. Run a little different, but we see it we saw it with Kingsbury with Arizona. We're seeing it now with Jaden Daniels and how well it's working, especially when you have a quarterback who can also use his legs and be a threat. But there are options for Kyle to incorporate aspects of his offense to where he does get the ball into a guy like Christian McCaffrey's hands in space to lessen the beating that he's getting game in and game out. He won't go air raid, by the way.
No, he's not going to do that. Kyle is definitely
what is this shotgun? What is this?
Well, and look, you don't have to go that far into it, but one thing Kyle doesn't do a lot, and I that's why I coined the term aggressively intermediate. That's the 49ers offense, right? And it's difficult on your quarterback because he's forcing some throws in the middle of the field. Every defense that goes against the 49ers knows where the throws are coming. They know to look for that backside dig. You see a lot of those Jimmy G interceptions where the linebacker's like, I'm going to show you this, but guess what? I know they're coming back over here. And some of those really smart players, Harrison Smith, you see got that. You're like, I know where this is coming. And they kind of show you one thing when they go back and get into that one spot. It makes it very difficult for the offense to hit all those throws so consistently in the same part of the football field. The thing the 49ers don't do, and this is where people get it really wrong about Brock Purdy and Kyle Shanahan's offense to talk about him being a check down merchant. There is no check down. The 49ers don't check the ball down. Patrick Mahomes checks the ball down all day long. The 49ers don't check the ball down. It's aggressively intermediate. They want to force the ball in the middle of the football field, get it down. There might not be a lot of deep throws, but there's not a lot of checkdowns. And that would be, I think, another way the 49ers could counter how teams are trying to play against the wide zone too, and ways to get Christian McCaffrey the ball in space, get your playmakers the best ball in space, not even check down mode, but just utilize Christian McCaffrey as a wide receiver, get more receptions, fewer carries out of the backfield potentially, and still utilize his talent. He can still be just as much a part of the game, but the thing that's going to wear him down, do that less, so he's stronger later in the season, later in his career. So, Croc, that being said, who could be getting the football in some of these other cases? Well, I think the 49ers have a really nice camp competition with Isaac Guerendo, who's kind of the incumbent backup running back. I don't think it's a slam dunk. It's going to be just Guerendo as RB2. The 49ers have two rookies that are going to make some waves and compete for touches as well, and roster spots for the San Francisco 49ers next. Real quick in the chat, Croc, JD says, hey, can't we just forget about last season? No, JD. How you going to learn if you don't look back at last season? You can learn just as much, if not more, from a 6-win season as you could from 2023 when everything went right for the San Francisco 49ers. So a lot to learn from looking back. So no, we cannot just forget about last season. Ian says, have to use Guerendo more. Is Isaac Guerendo the guy? Is he clearly running back two for you, Croc? Isaac Guerendo last year had a nice little season, and clearly he's got a height, weight, speed combination it's very nice, and he can catch the ball out of the backfield. Speaking of guy, he's a former wide receiver turned running back. My thing with Isaac Guerendo, and by the way, he had let's see, what was his? Yards per attempt. Where are we at? Oh yeah, five even yards per attempt last year. Jordan Mason was 5.2 yards per attempt. Guerendo was the second leading rusher on the Niners, and ended up starting 3 games at the end of the year when Mason and McCaffrey were both out. He ended up with 420 rushing yards on 84 carries. He also had 15 catches for 152 yards out of the backfield as a receiver, and showed some breakaway speed. I don't know if he is a pure running back in the way that if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, even if Guerendo is RB2, which I think he should be, I don't think that necessarily means he's RB1. I think that Isaac Guerendo is RB2 still, which means there's an opportunity for somebody else to be the lead back potentially if something happens to Christian McCaffrey again, because I don't know if Guerendo's that type of player. I mean, he started 1 game in college, and he didn't even prove that he could stay healthy as a main back for the 49ers last year in some limited games and limited work. So I like Guerendo as a number 2. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He can give you some of that stuff, but he's the complement to a lead guy. And I think that potentially the rookies, 5th round running back Jordan James out of Oregon, and don't discount undrafted rookie out of Cincinnati, Corey Kiner, both 1,000-yard backs in college. Last year, Jordan James for Oregon, his junior season, he had 1,267 rushing yards, 5.4 yards per carry. He had 7.1 yards per carry the year before when he was backing up Bucky Irving. We saw what Bucky Irving did in the NFL as a starter for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And Dane Brugler of The Athletic, Croc, thinks Jordan James was as good or better, actually, of a pro prospect than Bucky Irving. So the 5th rounder in Jordan James, and then Corey Kiner, who had back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons the last 2 years at Cincinnati, 5.5 and 5.7 yards per carry there, 1,047, 1,153 yards, respectively, his last 2 seasons. He's got balance. Both these guys are listed the same, around 5'9", 210 pounds-ish. But I think I like Jordan James with the feet. He's a little smoother of runner. Corey Kiner, I don't want to put the Frank Gore on him, but he's got that compact build. He's got crazy contact balance and like a thicker back to me than Jordan James does. I think they're both good. I think they're both NFL players. And Croc, they're battling each other, but they're also battling for a roster spot. But they're potentially battling Guerendo to be RB2. And Croc, if I'm correct, that means if Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, I think Guerendo's the better change of pace RB2, which means Jordan James, draft him in your fantasy leagues because he could potentially get RB1 carrying points soon.
Guerendo, watching him, there's a little bit of Raheem Mostert to his game. And so when you watch them run, it's kind of one speed. That one speed is kind of elite when they can hit it and get going. And we saw Raheem Mostert, he was a home run threat for the 49ers, and he was terrific. And it was almost like he got better the more they started incorporating him in as just as a true running back. I'm not sure if Guerendo is that guy. But with Jordan James, he's definitely that, right? Like he has good feet. You watch the patience, pass protection, all those things check out. And the one thing that's really big, right? We're talking about getting the ball to these running backs in space. This is a guy that almost doubled his receptions that he had the previous year. Obviously, Bucky Irving there with Oregon, that they were splitting time there. Bucky Irving went away. His receptions jumped up a little bit. All right, got about 26 catches, but he just showed like, hey, I got pass catching skills. I can block, and I can run the way that you want me to run with being able to see the holes. Is he the same home run threat as a Guerendo? No, he is not that. But 49ers don't need him to be, right? It's nice to have that, but you want that consistent runner, right? I want the guy, can he rip off? Kind of like J.P. Mason. Mason wasn't a home run threat every time he touched the ball, but you knew you were going to get 6. You were going to get 5. He was going to get those 20-yard carry here and there, right? He was very consistent with that, and he was a bruiser. He was a guy that people didn't want to tackle. Again, I don't think that James is that, right? Like as a finisher, but man, his feet, the way he sees the holes, all those things align with and the blocking and ability to catch the ball. It all aligns with someone that is potentially a 3-down back at the NFL level, maybe more so than Guerendo.
Also battling with the undrafted rookie, Corey Kiner. I don't necessarily think Jordan James is battling for a roster spot. He'd probably have to fall on his face in camp, and Kiner would have to look awesome. And, guys like Patrick Taylor, who's 32 years old, been around the league a little bit, was on the 49ers last year, and Izzy Abanikanda, who was drafted by the Jets, and he's another game-breaking guy. He's got one speed, and it's fast. And we didn't really get to see a lot of him on the 49ers last year after they brought him in late. But Izzy Abanikanda and Patrick Taylor are battling, and they're going to keep 4 running backs. And so Corey Kiner, I think he can beat out Patrick Taylor. I think he can probably beat out Izzy Abanikanda. Maybe Abanikanda can come back to the practice squad. If I had to project the 49ers running back group, I think that would be it.
Izzy, is that the guy from Pitt a few years back?
Yeah, from Pitt, and he was drafted by, was it the Jets? Yeah, the Jets, and just it didn't get any traction with the Jets. And Niners got him in year 2 last year. He's only going into year 3 right now.
Wow. He was a guy that I bet he would tell you, and this is the part of NFL roster politics. Like, dude, if I had carries, like I could do this with it, right? We've even seen some guys with 49ers leave, go other places, and be able to kind of gain a little traction and be able to, all of a sudden he's getting the ball, he's getting carries. Oh, it looks decent. He's able to contribute. I bet Izzy is a guy that was like, man, if I just had I think he got hurt or something. Did he get banged up?
He might have, because I remember identifying him pre-draft. I was like, well, this is the Raheem Mostert.
A lot of people liked him.
Shanahan style back all day long. Yeah.
A lot of people did like him.
Like the fit. So definitely don't count out Abanikanda or the veteran in Patrick Taylor. But I think the undrafted rookie, Corey Kiner's got an opportunity to be RB4. And, whoever RB4 is has to be able to play some special teams a little bit too. Be nice if, some of these guys could prove that they could maybe return some kicks as well. Battling for some guys at that spot. We'll talk about wide receivers and offensive line, the last 2 positions to preview here this week as we get ready for San Francisco 49ers training camp. And then a little battle at tight end as well, Croc, because obviously George Kittle is going to be on the field as much as humanly possible. The 49ers brought in free agency Luke Farrell, 6'5", 250, to give you that second blocking tight end. He'll be wearing number 89 for the 49ers. And by the way, hold on. What were we got to get ready because I don't even know what numbers all these guys are going to be wearing and what to look for when camp opens. Like, who's that guy? Who's number 20? Okay. Izzy Abanikanda is going to be wearing number 20. Guerendo's in 31. And then you've got Jordan James, the rookie, is going to be wearing number 29 for the 49ers. Corey Kiner in that 49 number. And so he's got to definitely earn another number. I think that'll be the first indication if he's wearing a different number that he's on the roster. So I can't see him sticking with that number. Patrick Taylor's staying in that number 32. So going back to the tight end position here, really quick, Croc. And I mean, I think we know what the roles are going to be for George Kittle. Luke Farrell, they paid him some money to come in and be he's not going to be a big weapon in the passing game. You can catch the ball and you throw it to him, but they brought him in to block. So the question is, how many tight ends do they carry? Who's tight end 3? Who's tight end 4? And it's an interesting group because Ross, the boss, Dwelly, is back with the 49ers in year 8 of his career. You got Mason Pline, who was a really interesting former basketball player. It was an undrafted player out of Furman last year for the 49ers. He's huge, 6'7", 260, natural athlete, wearing number 48 out there. He's got an opportunity to stick now that he's been playing football for a little while. He's late to the game, so you would think that they're raw and they might take some time, especially in Kyle Shanahan's offense. So Mason Pline's definitely a guy I'm looking at. He'll be battling with Jake Tongas, number 88, Braden Willis, a 7th rounder from a few years ago, still hanging on to a roster spot there, a little smaller, somewhat athletic, but for his size, not a great athlete. I think he could be potentially beaten out, but right now he would be the incumbent, probably tight end 3, I guess, for the 49ers going in. I think it's wide open after George Kittle and Luke Farrell at tight end between that group of guys. And then, do they keep 2 more of those guys, or are all those guys just battling for one more spot to break camp? And then they try to bring somebody back to the practice squad as the 4th tight end.
Well, I think a guy like Ross Dwelly, right? Like, obviously he's been around and you want that shiny new toy, but he has shown a certain level of consistency. It's wild to think that when you say, how long he's been in the NFL, he came in the year after George Kittle. So he's been around for a really long time. He understands what Kyle Shanahan wants, and there's value in that. Now, maybe the value lands him on the practice squad and somebody that can kind of yo-yo up and down from practice squad to active roster on game day. But we talked about Kyle Shanahan and needing to feel comfortable, right? Needing to have confidence in the guy, needing to be able to trust the guy. And I think Ross Dwelly is a guy that he truly trusts. So he would love to do better than Dwelly. He would love to get more. But he also knows, hey, man, you have Ross Dwelly around the building. He not only could be my tight end 2, kind of tight end 3, but they've used him as kind of like that H-back at times, put him in the fullback when Kyle Juszczyk wasn't out there. So there's just a certain level of versatility that they have with Dwelly that they may not have with some of the other guys, right? What is going on with Braden Willis? That's a guy that's hanging around, and we on previous episodes have talked about breakout players. Could Braden Willis be a guy that breaks out? He has shown a certain level of ability. We watched him in his game film at Oklahoma, and he showed some versatility there. When he got drafted, he said, hey, he's essentially going to make everybody pay, and they won't regret drafting him, but we haven't quite seen a return on that. He has been in the game in some important games, going back to his rookie year in the Super Bowl. He was out there, so you thought, okay, maybe they're going to build on that. They haven't quite done that yet. So is this year the big opportunity that he's kind of been waiting for when it is a wide open tight end room?
Yeah, and obviously the 49ers whiffed on Cam Latu a couple years ago. Willis was the 7th rounder when Latu was the 3rd rounder in that draft. But we've talked about this a lot. I talked about this with Larry on KMBR as well over the weekend, or on Friday it was, or was it Thursday? I can't remember. But teams can lie to you, right, in press conferences pre-draft, but when they actually make a move, they can't. They have to tell you the truth, right? When they actually draft a player, they have to tell you the truth. When they sign somebody, they have to tell you the truth. And what they told us about the 49ers roster is they didn't really like their tight end group after George Kittle very much. Because one of the biggest expenditures they made was a backup tight end, to a lot of people's surprise, in Luke Farrell. And Luke Farrell wasn't some big name backup tight end even, right? And so I think it is wide open. And Ross Dwelly, Kyle Shanahan trusts him, right? So there's a level of trust. Those young guys we talked about, whether it's Pline, whether it's Willis, they've got to prove to Kyle Shanahan that he can trust them to be, one injury away, one play away from being the tight end 2 potentially in a football game. If you're the 3rd guy that you break camp with. So I think it's a good camp competition there in some depth roles at running back and tight end for the 49ers this year. Let us know what you think. Who you think the winners are going to be? How's that depth chart to shake out at running back and tight end? Hit me and Croc up on Twitter at BD Peacock, at Coach Crocky. Of course, you can find us on any podcast platform. Drop a comment on YouTube. Subscribe while you're there. And Croc and I back tomorrow right here. Locked On 49ers.